I'd like to start this presentation with a quote from 1890. You may think, how is such an old quote relevant to the topics of today? And I think you will find that it is very relevant. Arthur Machen is talking here about taking a walk down a street, and the street becomes alive and begins to converse with him in human language. That the dogs and the cats speak out to him, and the stones in the ground change. And this is some pretty terrifying stuff. And when we talk about the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the everyday devices around us in the world coming alive, becoming conscious and thinking, and talking, maybe not directly to us, but certainly about us. So here is a short outline of this talk. It's going to be approximately 50 minutes. I hope to have some time for QA at the end. The language is English, as you may have noticed. And then we'll go through who the talk is for, briefly, a little bit about me, and then into the topic. The audience for this talk is architects and developers of the Internet of Things, so this is a development talk. I'm trying to reach out to people who are designing these systems and implementing them, maybe those who are choosing them, which ones are the right ones for them, in order to warn you that everything is really bad. And when you're making these technology choices, when you're building systems or selecting them, you need to be careful. So being that this is also a security conference, I have to accept that part of the audience is also security researchers who are interested in finding all the ways that these systems are bad and exploiting them or reporting on them responsibly. So you're also part of my audience. A little bit about me. So I have a background in hardware and firmware engineering, and I've gone on to be a full stack developer, meaning hardware all the way up into the cloud, and also a technologist. The first piece of hardware that I ever built was in 2005. I built a way to bypass copy protection on the Nintendo DS handheld. I was making independent games for Game Boy Advance, and there was no copy protection. And then this new console came, and all of a sudden, I couldn't make my games, and this made me very upset. So I broke the copy protection so I could make my games. And that started a lifelong obsession with building hardware and breaking things. In 2011, I joined the Open Beacon project, which examines connected living, how the relationships between people evolve in a space. And the reason I mention that here is because in 2013, at PHDays 3, we gave a talk and a workshop about Open Beacon, and that was the last time I was in Moscow. So actually, I'm very happy to be back here speaking at PHDays 6. Right now, I'm the VP of Technology at Kiwi. This is the only part where I'm going to talk about Kiwi. I'm talking about the IoT and privacy and security, but it's important because Kiwi is an IoT and security company. The idea of Kiwi is that we want to build an access system for apartment buildings that considers the user's privacy. It's an access control system built from the ground up by security researchers that at least shouldn't be trivial to hack. Nothing's impossible, but we try. Now I'd like to clear some definitions because everybody has different meanings for different words, and especially with multiple cultures and languages, it becomes a little bit difficult. So security, for me, is the freedom from risk or danger, or doubt or fear, measures adopted to prevent bad things from happening, spying, sabotage. It's being protected, feeling that you're okay. And privacy is information that belongs to a subgroup of people, one person, a few people, and not everyone. It's being out of sight. So it's not having secrets, but it's having private information. And the Internet of Things, this is sort of a joke definition, but it's connecting everything in order to provide amazing user experiences. Security and privacy be damned. And we'll go into what I mean by that throughout the talk. So first, there's 3 common IoT architectures I want to talk about. And I'll go into more depth in a little bit. But you have devices that are connected directly to the internet. You have devices that are connected through some sort of wireless sensor network and then connected to the internet. And you have devices that communicate primarily with a smartphone. So the first one, internet-connected devices. These devices are connected directly to the internet, so via Wi-Fi or 3G. And for Wi-Fi, it's connected through the consumer's home Wi-Fi. And for 3G, it's typically connected through a corporate telecom account. So it's not that you have to put a SIM card in. Usually there's one built in from the factory. There's a mix of devices here. You have everything from small microcontrollers that have very limited memory and flash. They have embedded IP stacks, if they have IP stacks at all. They're low power, they run on battery. And you have embedded Linux machines, multiple cores, floating point, and they're running Linux and the Linux IP stack. Now, just because they're running Linux doesn't mean it's running the latest Linux. A lot of devices are still running 2.4 and 2.6 kernels, but they're a little bit more strong. These are typically consumer devices, and they typically connect to cloud services, meaning AWS or something, in order to be useful, in order to be configured to provide whatever service that they're there to provide. Whereas devices that are connected to wireless sensor networks are a lot more diverse. So you have little things, they can be connected to power, they can run off of battery, and they connect through the wireless, to a gateway device. The gateway devices look very much like internet-connected devices. They just have an additional wireless interface on them where these smaller devices connect to. This is consumer devices, this is business-to-business devices, this is even government devices, so city management and things of that nature. And these are also typically managed by cloud services. The final major architecture, and these are not the only ones, but the major ones, is phone to device. There's a device, and you walk by with your smartphone, you have an app, and you can interact directly with the device. Most wearables also count as a BTLE device in this respect. So your phone has an internet connection when you need it. There's not really any networking going on, it's just the Bluetooth. These are usually consumer devices, and yeah. So, I want to briefly touch on medical devices. So there's a bunch of good work done by Fu and Jack and Halpern in this area, but they're not really the IoT yet. They're definitely devices, and they're definitely horribly designed and weak to security and all sorts of bad things, but your doctor's not communicating with your pacemaker remotely yet, and your insulin pump isn't reporting analytics to the hospital yet, and I want to keep it out of scope for this talk. So now let's talk a little bit about security. The security portion of this talk is very concrete. I'm going to give examples of devices that exist on the market and the problems that they have and ways that you can not have the same problems. And then I'll talk about the privacy aspect, which is a little bit more abstract. So on security, when you're designing a system, you have to consider your adversary. Who are you trying to protect against? Are you trying to protect against the government? You're probably not going to be successful. Are you trying to defend against well-funded smart people? So that means a university or research institution? Maybe. Are you trying to defend against a dedicated hacker? Someone with nothing but time and your device and a need for caffeine and not much else? Maybe. Are you trying to defend against someone who goes on the internet and does a Google search for your product to see if somebody else has broken it and how easy it could be? This is probably a more reasonable adversary. But as you'll see, most companies don't even bother. And that's really a problem. So, given that most of your adversaries are better equipped than you, have more money than you, have more experience than you, your security is going to be broken. And what you do when that happens determines how well you come out of it. So you need to plan for when this happens. You need to have defense in depth. And I'm not here to educate you on what that means, but basically it means one defensive measure is not enough, and two is not enough. You need to have an onion of protection to have proper security. And finally, on this, shortcuts hurt in the long term. When you're at a startup or a small company and you need to get something on the market, it can be really tempting just to ship it. It works, but it's not secure. But in the long term, it always comes back to bite you. So let's talk about SimpliSafe. This is the #1 security fire alarm system in the United States. There's more than 300,000 of them on the market. And they didn't do anything right. It's very sad. The way that it works is a traditional security system is wired. So when it's installed, the electrician comes and runs wires all through your house. And SimpliSafe is wireless. Which means it's easy and comfortable and convenient. But the wireless interface isn't secure. It's unencrypted. There's no attempt at security or anything. Basically, you can see the whole system working remotely. And I'll talk a little bit about tools later. The security researcher that reported on SimpliSafe, he said, "Hey guys, your product's insecure," and the company didn't respond, and didn't respond, and didn't respond. And after 5 months, the security researcher released his findings, which was that it's crap. And that was February of this year. Now, SimpliSafe has what's known as a one-time programmable microcontroller. So that means that they can't fix the devices. The firmware that they were manufactured with that's insecure, that doesn't have any security, is the firmware that they're going to have. Unbelievable. Maybe a little bit less infrastructure critical is LIFX. LIFX makes smart light bulbs. They make colorful ones and white light bulbs. They're connected to the customer's Wi-Fi, and they communicate over this 802.15.4. This is a wireless sensor network to spread the configuration. LIFX, they didn't protect the firmware on their devices. So anyone could pull a bulb out of a socket, read out what the bulb was doing. And it turns out that they're using some symmetric crypto, some AES, and the key, apart from being the same on all the devices, was stored in the firmware that they didn't protect. And they use this key to share the Wi-Fi credentials between all the bulbs. So anyone that installed these bulbs in their house has been broadcasting their Wi-Fi password for anyone to see. And yeah, good job, guys. They did publish a firmware update. So now if you buy these bulbs, at least they're not doing that. This company I won't name because the security researcher who did the research also won't name them. Apparently, he's still dealing with the responsible disclosure. This is a smart lock device. It's available for sale. You can buy it on Amazon. They sell it to the EU and the United States. It works directly with a smartphone. You can configure it to add keys. You can configure it, you can give someone access and they open their smartphone. All of the authentication and security is in the smartphone app. The actual Bluetooth communication has no security. You can read out who came to the door and when. You can unlock the door just with a simple replay. You can even do much nastier things like drain the battery with a simple unauthenticated command. This is the state-of-the-art smart devices here. It's not just little companies that you've never heard of. Samsung recently purchased SmartThings. It is more than just a smart device. It is a hub and app ecosystem with a bunch of vulnerabilities that look like a set of web vulnerabilities, because most of them are. They had a flawed OAuth implementation, meaning that anyone could hijack credentials to your house. They didn't check iframes and embedding, so it was trivial to get an authentication and mess with people's devices. They have a marketplace where you can add apps for your SmartThings, and none of the apps' privileges were checked. So you could have something innocuous looking like a battery monitor that could actually take full control over your system and forward it to wherever you want. I'll be talking more about Samsung in the privacy bit. They're a little bit unbelievable. So apart from talking about one particular device now, I want to talk about some protocols, some baseline fundamentals of the Internet of Things. Zigbee and Zigbee Pro is a set of protocols. It was designed in 2004 and then updated in 2007. It's a slightly older standard, but what that means is that there are a lot of Zigbee devices in the field. The design goals for Zigbee are low cost and simplicity. It should be easy to put something together with Zigbee that performs something, that does something. One thing about Zigbee that differentiates it from Wi-Fi or 3G is that people think that Zigbee is safe. So they do things with Zigbee that they don't do connected to the internet normally. They use it to control industrial devices. They use it for HVAC in commercial buildings and building automation. But they also have smart locks and smart thermostats and all manner of normal smart things. The Zigbee that came out in 2004 uses CCMP. It's also based on AES. If any of you remember when the Wi-Fi WEP scheme was broken, WEP uses also CCMP, and yes, it's still broken. If you know plain text, which with these devices they're sending the same things over and over, then you can break the entire encryption scheme. So Zigbee Pro fixed that in 2007, but replaced it with something maybe even worse. With these devices, you need to share a key between the whole network. And you can either do that by reflashing them or delivering a key once they get on the network. And most devices get their key when they first get on the network in plain text without encryption. So again, good idea, well, flawed implementation. Also, there's no replay protection in Zigbee. None. So To give you an idea about why replay protection is important, if you could imagine you have a industrial HVAC system, heating and air conditioning, and you want to increase the temperature 1 degree. It's a little bit cold. And now somebody comes along and says, increase the temperature 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree. Suddenly it becomes very hot. And this is, yeah, it's a problem. It's not just Zigbee. Here is the platform and protocol support list from an IoT infrastructure company. The idea is you use them instead of setting up your own system because setting up systems is hard. So they support all the wonderful maker platforms. You've got Arduino and Raspberry Pi and all the great protocols, HTTP, CoAP, UDP, TCP, and encryption is available. The CoAP is an Internet of Things standard, and it is optional to encrypt it. And what you find with this optionally secure is what it actually means is by default insecure. And this idea that we need to get something into the market fast, that we need to be the first mover, means that nobody ever implements the encryption. It's as if it's not even there, and a lot of times it's not. So one thing that makes the IoT very different from traditional IT systems is that the attack surface is very, very big. What do I mean by attack surface? So if you look at the complexity of a system and imagine hundreds of gateway devices, thousands of nodes, all connected over kilometers with a wireless network. And now imagine that each one of those devices is running some sort of software stack. The gateway is probably some sort of Linux, the device is some embedded thing. And you can begin to understand that every single point on the chain is an attack surface. You can attack the hardware. You can attack the firmware. And you don't have to be anywhere near it. You can be kilometers away. You can attack it through the wireless communications. You can attack it from the internet. You can attack it from the cloud. You can attack it from cell phones. It's gigantic. And when you have such a huge attack surface, it's a matter of when, not if. Just to summarize, here are some of the common failings when people design these systems. The first is just basic stuff, like replay attacks, leaving your secrets unprotected, not using any crypto, building a system without thinking that maybe somebody not nice wants to abuse it. And then there's some slightly more complicated, but not really complicated things, not including the ability to update the firmware. A lot of these devices are built into walls and buildings and streets, and you can't go put your hands on them when you need to update them. And if you don't have a secure remote firmware update mechanism, then what you ship on day one is the product you have to support for the next 5, 10, 15 years. A lot of these devices don't authenticate communications. Anyone can come in and start to talk with them. And they're treated as if they are the real, genuine devices. The ones that do authenticate communications very rarely secure the confidentiality. So anyone can see the traffic going back and forth. So the security system from before, when you enter your PIN on a PIN pad, it's sent in clear text to all the devices to disarm the system. As we saw with the smart light bulbs, many of these devices ship with microcontrollers that don't secure their flash, or they just don't enable the feature that's built in because it's too difficult. And almost all of them fail to consider the attack surface of wireless devices. So Bluetooth LE has a functional range of something like 10 meters, but if you get a nice big antenna, then you can attack these devices from 500 meters away or more. Let's talk a little bit about the tools that people are going to use to try to attack your systems. So the kind of things you want to do is you want to be able to monitor the traffic, the signals that are being sent, so that's on the devices and in the air. You want to be able to inject messages, so either replaying existing messages or trying to invent new ones to expose problems in the implementations. And you're going to want to be able to take pictures of the devices, the flash contents, the memory. You're going to want to be able to pick them apart. And how do you do that? And how available are these tools? So I have a selection of devices which make it really easy, and you'll see the prices in US dollars. They're not expensive. With about $1,000, you can get everything that you need to break apart any one of these IoT devices. The first one is the picture I have. It's a software-defined radio. And with a software-defined radio, you can, in software, make a radio device. What do I mean by that? So you have a security system, and you know it transmits in this 400 megahertz spectrum. You know because you read the back of it, and it tells you. So you say, okay, SDR, tune to this frequency and record everything that happens. And then you get something like that, a nice little graph over time. And then you say, okay, SDR, I think that this is the protocol. Decode it for me. And then you have, in software, defined a radio device that can communicate with this security system. And then you say, okay, SDR, now transmit this. And then it transmits. You don't need any special hardware to break wireless communications. General purpose hardware is available on the market today. If you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to break something a little bit more specific, there's something called the Ubertooth for $120 that is specifically designed to break Bluetooth and Bluetooth LE. With such a device, you can break that lock that I showed you earlier, record packets, replay them, everything you need. And there's a great presentation from RSA by Joe Grand, and I have the URL there, where he goes through all of the tools that people are going to use against your products, or that you would want to use against hardware products. And basically the process goes like this. You understand what's going on, and then you understand where the potential vulnerabilities are, and then you poke it until it falls over. And usually it doesn't take that long. So now I'd like to switch gears a little bit away from security and doom and gloom and talk a little bit about privacy, which is the other major topic in the Internet of Things. I have some choice quotes from industry here. And usually I don't read slides, but these I'll read because I feel like you need to really hear them. The last CEO of Sun Microsystems, Scott McNealy, said, "You have zero privacy anyway. Get over it." Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, now Alphabet, said, "We know where you are. We know where you've been. We can more or less know what you're thinking about." And the last one's from Stephen King from Firestarter. And it's, "No one likes to see a government folder with his name on it." And then I have this lovely privacy reminder from Google that you see whenever you use a Google service from a new country. This is the American one. It's a lot less scary than the German one because the laws are a little bit more lax. But the general idea is there's a couple hundred pages about all the things that they do with what they know about you. None of it's nice. And just to tie security and privacy together, Even if you have a responsible company that just collects the data that they need in order to provide the service to you, that never shares it with a third party, that never does any really creepy analytics with it, the security is not going to be that great. The security against data breach, so that's an attacker coming and liberating that data. That's against the government coming and giving a subpoena or an injunction demanding that data. Or accidental disclosure. We made a mistake and now all of our customer information is available. So what can you do? The most responsible thing to do with your customers' data is not to have it, not to collect it, not to keep it. If you don't have it, you can't give it away. If you don't have it, you can't be forced to give it away. If you don't have it, people can't break in and take it from you. There's a big problem with the Internet of Things in particular is over-collection. That's, I want to provide some hardware that allows me to provide a service. And while I'm there, I'm already building the hardware, so why don't I stick some extra sensors on there and see what extra data I can collect. So, I'm a smart meter. I need to measure the power consumption in order to charge an accurate bill. That sounds reasonable. But I'm also measuring at a very high frequency, and I'm correlating that with what time of the day it is. So now with this information, not only do I know how much power you're using, but I also know when you come home and when you leave. And I can even tell what you're watching on TV just from the power consumption. I have so much data from all of my customers, and I know what's being broadcast on TV. I can make that correlation, and it's very, very accurate. That's a little bit creepy, but it's not super creepy. The Nest thermostat is really creepy. So it needs to know the temperature in order to regulate the heat in your apartment. This is also fairly reasonable. However, it has 3 temperature sensors. It has a humidity sensor, a motion sensor, and a light sensor. It also connects to the internet in order to figure out what the weather is in your location. It knows when you wake up in the morning. It knows when you take a shower. It knows where in your home you are. It knows how many people live in your house. It knows when you're throwing a party. It knows if you have a pet. And all of that information is being stored and sent to Google in Google's cloud, subject to their privacy terms, which nobody reads. I told you I'd get back to Samsung. So here are some quotes. The first one is from their terms and conditions for their newer smart TVs. And the second is their PR spin when confronted. Basically, these Samsung smart TVs have a voice recognition feature that's always listening, and they warn you that whatever you say in front of your TV is being recorded and sent to their servers and then given to third parties. And that you probably don't want to say anything confidential in front of their TVs. And when called on this, they say, we take our consumer privacy very seriously. We employ industry standard security, which we've just got done seeing how secure the industry standard is, to secure our customers' personal information and prevent unauthorized collection or use. Unauthorized by whom? So Samsung is really creepy. This is even creepier. This is a device that has no function other than to be listening all the time in order to provide value, I guess. I don't know. This is the Amazon Echo. It costs approximately $200. It listens to you and sends what you're saying to Amazon. Their cloud computers, they analyze what you're saying to try and give you answers to things like, what's the weather today, or who was that guy in that movie? But then they do what none of the other companies admit to doing. They store your audio. It's not just a one-time thing. You can log into your Amazon account and see all the audio that they've stored. And they say, well, hold on now. We need that audio in order to make the experience better. If you delete it, it may not work so well. So I find that very creepy. There's also the problem of ethics. So two of these are a joke, and one of them's not a joke. And I challenge you to try and figure out which one of these isn't a joke. To me, they're all completely ridiculous. The one on the left is a smart thermostat saying, hey, if you would like the ability to set your thermostat above 25 degrees, you need to pay us. The one in the middle is a smartphone-connected pregnancy kit. And you can use the power of the cloud to help you determine if you've become pregnant. And the last one is a home security system, and it's offering to delete the footage of that thing you did for a low one-time price of $10. So thankfully, the thermostat is a joke, and the security camera is also a joke right now. But the pregnancy test is real. And this is starting to get into some very interesting ethical areas about what information is being collected, how it's being collected, how it's being used. How much do you want to bet that if you use that pregnancy test and it comes back positive, all of a sudden you start getting advertisements for baby clothes and baby food and diapers and things like that? Or maybe you get a sad condolence card when it's negative. I want to talk a little bit about how the world is changing and how the Internet of Things is helping the world to change. So when we talk about ubiquity, we mean things being all around us in our daily lives. And in the year 2000, there wasn't a lot of that. There was still Web 1.0, things were going well. And then things like Facebook came around. So you sign up for Facebook, they have a terms and conditions, you don't read them, you just click through. You're using the service, you're adding your data, you're taking pictures, status updates, likes. The relationship between you and Facebook is still pretty clear, so you give them information and they make money. Everywhere you go on the internet, you're tracked by Facebook. There's everywhere that there's a like button, they follow you around. Even if you don't have a Facebook account, they have a profile for you. But at least your interactions with Facebook are regulated. When we talk about ubiquity now, we talk about companies like Placemeter. Placemeter is a company where they have video cameras that they put in high places looking down at the street. And they generate metrics and information based on the video that they see. So without having to sign up for a service, without having to agree to anything, without any control about knowing when or where or how, your actions are now being monitored and recorded and used to create value. So now, every time you walk out of your door, something somewhere is monitoring you and keeping track. One thing to think about is that gates are unique. They're as unique as fingerprints. If you have video of somebody walking, you can use that to determine who they are. So if you have these video feeds all over the cities of people walking around, you can start to track them. And you can use that for whatever you want. This, by the way, is a street in New York City, and they're counting how many people go into the different buildings. Or that's what they say they're counting. And please don't misunderstand me. I don't think that you have to choose between going off and living on a farm with no electricity or completely submitting to the Google, Facebook, technotopia. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that we can live in the modern world without having to sacrifice all of our data privacy and without having to give up any sense of security. To put this in perspective, Cisco has a report about what they expect the internet to look like. And they say that in 2019, there'll be almost 4 billion internet users. More than half the world population will be connected to the internet. And at the same time, there'll be 6 times as many devices as people connected. The value is 19 trillion, with something like 12 trillion in the private sector and 6 trillion in government. There'll be 10.5 billion M2M connections, machine to machine. And smart homes, smart appliances, home security, all this broken stuff that we were just talking about is going to be something like half of those M2M connections. 5 billion broken smart devices. It's a little bit scary. What kind of world are we building? When Orwell wrote 1984, he had this idea that an oppressive government was going to come in and force everybody to put this telescreen on the wall that they could simultaneously broadcast their propaganda and monitor the users with video and audio. I don't think he had any idea that people would willingly go to the store and buy these devices and put them in their houses. So, thank you very much. That's my talk about privacy and security in the IoT. And now I have some time for questions. And I need...
Any questions?
Hello, thanks for your talk. Do you see any ways to get out of this trouble?
The way that I see to get out of this trouble is for people to become more informed about this trouble. And what I mean by that is, when you go to the store and you see the Samsung Smart TV, the first thing you don't say is, oh man, that's like problematic that it has this voice recording feature. The first thing you say is, oh wow, it's got 4K. That's like, I need that, it's cheap. And this concept of consumer education is something that everyone can participate in. You don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be a billionaire, you just have to be concerned. The second way that I see that we can avoid these sort of two extremes is for the people that are building these devices to take some sort of responsibility for the things that they're building, that they're creating, that they're bringing into the world. The company that made the security system that's completely insecure is still in business, and they're still selling those systems, and they're still insecure. And they don't have any repercussions. They had some bad news press, and that's about it. So again, it comes to people to hold these companies accountable for what they're doing. So if you have the choice between two different providers and one of them makes a strong stand on privacy and the other one doesn't mention it, then I would urge you to select the provider that has a strong security and privacy background. That would be the thing that everyone can do.
There are some ideas that some industrial standards of IoT can help develop more secure devices. What do you think about it?
I think I sort of already said what I think about the standard. So Zigbee is an industrial standard. It has been since 2004. It's insecure by design. CoAP is currently the #1 to be the protocol for the Internet of Things, and it has security optional. So I agree that standards could solve some of these problems, but the standards have to be good. Yeah? One thing I didn't talk about is the car manufacturers who are bringing their car entertainment systems, connecting them to the internet, and simultaneously connecting them to the drive systems. And about a year ago, there were a bunch of security researchers who discovered that they could do things like turn off an engine or control the radio remotely through the internet to cars on the road. And being car companies, they said, oh my God, this is horrible, and they issued a recall, and they made sure it didn't happen again. But I think that's the only time, at least in my recollection, that an industry has stood up and noticed, oh hey, maybe it's not a good idea to have these insecure products on the market. I think so far there hasn't really been this one moment, this defining thing where a bunch of people got hurt that has caused some sort of security focus to enter to the standardization process. I would love to have a secure standard. ARM, the company that makes most of the microcontrollers in the world, is working on a system that would be secure. But they've been working on it, and I don't know if it's released yet. I think it's an open beta. But in the meantime, people are bringing more and more products onto the market that are defective by design.
Thank you.
So, and there is any product that is really secure and good privacy?
I guess there's lots and lots of different products. It would be difficult for me to stand here and endorse one of them over another one. I can say that Kiwi respects privacy more so than any other company that I know. I won't say that the security is impenetrable, because no security is impenetrable, but we try. And there's a lot of companies that are building devices that are at least reasonably secure. And the biggest problem from my perspective is there's no way to know. There's no way to know if the devices you're building or selecting or bringing into your house, your business, are secure until somebody has broken them. And so basically what I have is I have a batch of products that maybe they're secure and maybe they respect privacy, or for sure they're not secure and for sure they don't respect privacy. So it's hard to say, here is a product that's awesome. I just can't think of one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your lecture. But as far as I have understood, your lecture was concentrated, was focused on examples about smart home security and so on. Do you plan to deeply investigate some other fields of smart devices, for example, devices that are used in transport infrastructure, warehouse, logistics, and so on?
So thank you for your comment. I chose devices that are seen in and around the home because I feel like many people can identify with them and maybe had even considered buying them or have bought them. There's this whole world of the industrial Internet of Things that you're correct, I didn't touch on. And everything that's bad about the devices in the smart home are bad about the devices there as well. And to give you an idea of the kinds of industries that the Internet of Things is touching, in addition to logistics and warehousing and transport, there's also agriculture, so farming and farming equipment. There's also city planning, so that means things like lights in the city, transit networks, parking space meters, signs, everything like that. And then there's really boring, dumb stuff like toilets and trash cans and soap dispensers, all that kind of thing. Then you have building management. That means elevators, escalators, HVAC, lighting, anything that runs on electricity, people are sticking smart microcontrollers in and connecting them up to one of these internet gateways or protocols or sensor networks. And I guess, so to summarize, what I showed is a slice of the IoT that people could relate with, but it's all equally bad.
And are you interested in researches that are focused on industrial devices that are probably are insecure, such as home devices?
I'm definitely interested to hear more about specific problems in industrial devices. I know that there are a lot of companies that exist purely on going into factories, connecting a device to the network, and finding all of the things that are insecure or not configured properly or any of those things. And there's a lot of problems in these scenarios that's not even connected to the Internet of Things. Just as soon as they got Ethernet connected SCADA systems, they connected everything together on their network, and anyone with a USB key they picked up in the parking lot, plugs it into the office computer, suddenly has access to all of their machines. There was an example I pulled out, actually, which was there's a steel mill in Germany that connected all of their mills to a management network, and someone was able to get in and remove their ability to stop the mills. And so they had to power everything off. It cost them multiple millions of euros. But these security problems are definitely not isolated to the home or consumer markets. More questions? Discussions? Last call for questions?
So the privacy question, we all know that the companies like Facebook and Google, they actually use our private data just to make money, and this is a huge amount of money. And the problem is that it's almost everyone on Facebook, and almost everyone will probably gonna to buy the Samsung TV rather than another, maybe little bit not so good. And so, do you expect that some commercial force could be opposite to this one? Just like for example, if you could advertise private system at home or private communication for people who would actually be concerned and buy this thing just because they more private or expect your privacy, and bring more people to this to use those systems and devices.
Well, I can say I certainly hope so. So one of the things that we do at Kiwi is that we communicate that we are privacy respecting and secure, developed with security researchers. But I think the bigger answer to your question is it depends. It depends on culture. It depends on the knowledge level of the consumers. It depends very much on where in the world your product or service is available. So Google has nearly a monopoly on search in the EU. In Germany and France, something like 95+% of searches are on Google. But not so in Russia, and not so actually in the United States. They only have 60% of the search volume there. And in China and Southeast Asia, Google is number 2 or number 3. So it's certainly, there's different things, and of course in China, the number 1 probably is also not so nice in terms of privacy. But privacy as a distinguishing mark is becoming something that the companies are using to differentiate. If they say, yeah, we're not Google, we don't track you, we're not creepy, You could use them, but if you pay us a little bit more, then you get the same level of service or better, and we don't share your private data. In the EU and Germany, Germans are very conscious about security and data privacy. And a lot of it comes from their first-hand or second-hand experience during the Cold War days, where they had the secret police and people informing and all of this stuff. So there's this strong, it's called Datenschutz concept. It's in the German culture, from the laws, from the people. And in this sort of a culture, then if you say your service is secure and it respects their privacy, you do much, much better. In a culture like the United States, where it's all about easy and convenient and cheap and fast, then maybe people don't care so much. And this is what I meant with my answer to the other question, which is the most important thing is consumer education. That's how we can change these businesses and their business practices, and how we can force the commercial environment in a direction that's more suitable to the modern world.
From your point of view, for the IoT, is it better to use the existing security mechanism or provide the new one, specific one, just for IoT?
From the perspective of security, it's always better to use something that is known and existed and is proven to work. All of these standards and things have these optional securities in them that are pretty good. So the optional security for CoAP, for instance, is DTLS, which is a reasonably secure standard. I think that anytime you come up with your own security scheme, you need to, first of all, heavily research it. You need to, second of all, understand what you're doing. And then third, it needs to have some sort of lifetime in the market to determine if it's actually secure or if you just think it is. And also the design of a security system versus the implementation of the security system has a big impact on how actually secure it is. What would be really nice, and as I mentioned before, ARM is doing this, if these basic building blocks of building a secure IoT were available and they were the easy choice, then we would see a lot more secure devices. Unfortunately, right now, the easy choice is nothing. There is no easy security.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question in the back. Okay, this is the last one.
Excuse me, Jeff, I was late on your presentation, but I want to ask. You talk about security in the Internet of Things. Are there any solutions when it's easier to combine Internet of Things in one control system, which take data from them and communicate between them inside local network, not internet? Are there any solutions? It's easier because you don't need to provide to make security for each Internet of Things. You need to provide security for only one control system. Are there any solutions in that?
So if I understand your question correctly, it's the Internet of Things. I mentioned this large attack surface with complexity and all the different pieces. Mm-hmm. And your question is, if I take out the Internet from the Internet of Things, mm-hmm. and it becomes the intranet of things, a bunch of devices connected together, is there a solution that allows me to make such a thing secure? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my answer to that is, there is not an off-the-shelf thing in isolation that you can do. And the other thing about that is you're now removing one piece of the complexity, but all of the wireless interfaces, all of the embedded technology stacks, all of the protocols and implementations, physical design is still weak. So not connecting it to the internet makes it a little bit easier. But if, and to talk about it from a privacy perspective, if you're taking data and you're collecting it and managing it somewhere centrally, it doesn't really matter if it's connected to the internet or not. You're collecting all of this data and it's still there and it's still a problem and can be a problem to secure.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.